First reading this morning is from the second book of Kings, chapter 5, reading some of the story of Naaman the leper. Now Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. "By all means go," the king of Aram replied. "I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, "With this letter, I am sending my servant Naaman to you, so that you may cure him of his leprosy." As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, "Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? See how he's trying to pick a quarrel with me." When Elisha, when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him the message, "Why have you torn your robes? Make the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to say to him, "Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed." But Naaman went away angry and said, "I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed?" So he turned and went off in a rage. Naaman's servants went to him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, 'Wash and be cleansed'?" So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. Then Naaman and all his attendants went back to the man of God. He stood before him and said, "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel." And then reading from Luke chapter 17, Jesus heals 10 men with leprosy. Now, on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When he saw them, he said, "Go, show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 men cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Hazel. How would you describe yourself? And I wonder if the person sitting next to you would describe you in the same way. I would say I was shy, not good at small talk, and I'm totally unable to think on my feet. Now, standing here, you might think that doesn't sound much like me, or you might think, yes, I can see she's terrified, but I don't know. The way others see you is often not as others see you, isn't it? But first impressions can be lasting. And you often make your mind up, and it takes a while for you to change that. I wonder what's happened on your life journeys to make you the way that you are now. We're unique and consequently very different. And I'm sure that on those journeys, memories have played a big part in making you who you are. Not just remembering things of the past, but remembering day-to-day things. It's getting more and more difficult for me, hence my notes. I just need prodding constantly these days, which is terrifying. What are important memories to you? Do you feel that they've shaped you? And how did you work out your priorities? What's more important than the other? Which ones are worth remembering? There was a time when being the height of fashion was really important for me. That's now long gone. Comfort's the most important thing. And all we do impacts on who we are. And the sad fact is, if we lose our memory, we lose our identity. It's not just where our memory, a memory is not just where we store the past, but it's where we develop our life too. Not to remember something probably means to you that never existed. So when we start forgetting birthdays and wedding anniversaries, that's why we get into trouble. I watched a heartbreaking thing on the news this week. Did you see it, about a couple dealing with dementia? It's one of life's cruelties, isn't it? And we need to pray for people with dementia because they are sadly neglected by our failing social care system. And memory is important. If we forget God, we lose our relationship with him. But because we know that to know him makes our life so much greater and allows us to grow and develop continually in that. In the readings, it's not just remembering who people have been, but how they take a step forward and move on also. Naaman was a soldier, a family man, a confident man. Reading about him, I wonder just how humble he was. I think when you're in that position of power, you're authoritarian, aren't you? Yet he had this disease. It's unlikely to have been leprosy, although it's been, as it's been transcribed, put down as leprosy. But it was certainly a skin disease. The reason I say that is because he wasn't an outcast. He's still in this position of power. If he'd had leprosy, he would have been alone. It could have been something like severe eczema or maybe psoriasis that comes and goes. But regardless, it would have been very difficult to maintain that position if your skin florid red and flaking. And to live with a continuing illness is debilitating, it's life-changing. And in those days would not be clearly understood, and still sometimes isn't today. He knew who he was. He led the army. and was used to being obeyed. So to listen eventually and to follow the instructions of Elijah on the recommendation of a servant girl is quite extraordinary. And to do the right thing, even as people of faith, it can be hard, especially when we don't really know why we've been asked to do it. But the way God approaches it in the ordinary leads us to extraordinary blessings, as Naaman found out. God meets us where we are, no matter how feeble and misguided we are. He's looking for that one step forward that shows him that we still believe in him and his power. And then the rest, God leads us through. In Luke, the beginning of the chapter, we get some brief teachings on discipleship, and there's a warning not to ruin other people's faith. Forgiveness, faith, and recognition is important as we work for Jesus to do well and to enjoy the joy and privilege it brings. If we think about Paul when he wrote his letters, he continually reminds people to follow their faith and to spread the word of God wherever they go. When he writes his letter to Timothy, he's in prison, in chains, and yet he's more concerned about Timothy than himself, that he continues the work that God has given him. In the psalm we read this morning, the first verse was, "I will thank the Lord with all my heart as I meet with his godly people." And then we move on in the next bit of the chapter to where Jesus enters the village, and he's approached by these 10 men. And they are living a life alone with leprosy. But they approach him with excitement and anticipation from a distance. And we can appreciate that now, can't we? Having gone through COVID and now 2 meters apart. It probably means a little bit more about how difficult distance is, even though it's short. And also, during lockdown, a lot of us had religious isolation as well. I know there was Zoom and there was telephone worship, but that didn't appeal to everybody. And I don't know about here, but we still have people who haven't wandered back, even though we're told we're okay to do so. Imagine a lifetime alone with no God to help you, no faith. So if you got the opportunity, being ill, to be cured, you'd take it, wouldn't you? You can't blame these men for going and saying, please. So they approach him, but he doesn't heal them immediately. He tests their faith like he did with Naaman. Nothing changes, and he sends them off to see the priest. But as they go to see the priest, they were cleansed. Presumably, when they went to see the cleansed, they were pronounced publicly that they were now clean. The 10 men experienced the grace and power of Jesus, but 9 continue on their way, probably never giving Jesus or the gift he's bestowed on them a thought. Maybe they were frightened when they thought about it, because at this time, Jesus was a marked man. Obviously happy that they've been healed, but one of them was not only happy, but grateful. And he promptly lifts his voice to praise the Lord. Luke shows up not only the other 9, but us also, if we are not out there praising God. In a world where we often take health, wealth, happiness, and all the comforts for granted, it's a healthy life to live a life with gratitude. The healing of the skin not being immediate, people have long memories. They probably still had a tough time out there because they would be known as whatever the leper. And to recognize the healing would perhaps take time. I presume you've heard of the leprosy mission. Their role is not only still today to provide funds for treatment and to prevent transmission, but also to work against discrimination and disability. Imagine being present at that healing. It's a good place to reflect on and to sit on and to think about, how would I feel in that situation if I was a leper? What would my reaction have been? How would I have been if I'd have been a member of the crowd? What would I have thought about the goings on? How could this affect your view today? Got a very short video from the leprosy mission for you.
Hi there. I wonder if I can have 2 minutes of your busy day today for my friend Arshad. Arshad has leprosy. That's right. Today, Arshad is living with leprosy. In fact, he's one of more than 200,000 people who are newly diagnosed each year. Arshad is feeling full of shame and sad because people in his community believe he is contagious and that he is cursed. And worse, he's feeling worthless because most people in the world believe that leprosy hasn't existed since ancient times. Arshad would like you to know more about his disease. Leprosy is a mildly infectious condition caused by a bacteria related to tuberculosis. 95% of us are naturally immune to it, but it's more common in countries where poverty is rife and people's immune systems are not strong. If left untreated, leprosy causes damage to large nerves in the hands and feet, so the patient simply doesn't feel it when they hurt themselves. These wounds and the ulcers they often cause can ultimately lead to permanent disability, amputation, and despair. Leprosy is also one of the world's most stigmatizing diseases. Whole families see their education, job, and marriage prospects affected by discrimination and misunderstanding, often being denied their basic human rights. Even if aware that they have leprosy, patients fear being diagnosed, so fail to seek treatment, perpetuating a vicious cycle of disease, disability, and discrimination. 3 million people in the world are living with irreversible disabilities caused by late treatment of leprosy. But since 1982, an effective cure has been available. None of this has to happen. Arshad has been receiving support from the Leprosy Mission for a while now. We're a global charity working to diagnose, treat, and rehabilitate those who are suffering from this dreadful disease. After medication cured Arshad of leprosy, surgery helped him to use his hands and feet again. Now he's studying at one of our training centres so he can get a job and sustain himself. And thanks to awareness raising in his community, people now know that those affected by leprosy should not be outcasts and have the same rights as anyone else. We don't just help cure leprosy. Our hope is for more people to be educated about the disease. Since you started watching this film, somewhere in the world, someone has been diagnosed with leprosy. Show your support by sharing this video. We can't turn back the clock, but we can stop it ticking on this silently destructive disease. Thanks for watching.
Healing God, what would we do? Would we rush to see our family? Would we seek approval from the powers that be? Would we bathe in the communal pool? Would we toss our bell into the river? Would we sing in joy? Would we laugh and giggle? Would we count the days, months, and years lost? Would we seek out those who cast us out? Would we try to get our old job back? Or would we give thanks to the one who released us from the burden of what trapped us, seeking to know more about the one who transformed our present and our future, committing ourselves to the same transforming love in whatever way we can? Healing God, what would we do? Healing God, what do we do? And leprosy, of course, is only one disability. There's so many others with the same repercussions. God sees everyone as equal. And that was put in very well in the, I thought, in the Shack, the book. Have you read it? By William Young. Mac is surprised when he meets Jesus. He says to him, "Oh, I thought you'd be more handsome." And Jesus says to him, "That won't matter. That won't be important when you get to know me." When Jesus meets lepers, he doesn't see disease or their living conditions. He sees people created in God's image who have potential to live a full life, even though they've been prevented so far. I'm sure even though they were healed, they'd never forget those difficult times that they'd lived through. They'd have some quite hurtful memories. If you met Jesus today, what would he see in you? How do you present yourself to the world? What have you learned from those memories that you have? At the end of the chapter, verse 16 says, he threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, and he was a Samaritan. Shock, horror. The Samaritan, by returning to Jesus, shows recognition of the fact that God was working through him. And to witness this act as one of the crowd would give them the confidence to trust Jesus too. Jesus has constantly in his teaching repeated that it will be sinners and Gentiles who enter the kingdom first. And the final words, "Rise and go, your faith has made you well," are the crux of the story, really. Get up at this time would have spoken to those people of resurrection, like the prodigal son, though. The man was dead and is now alive again. New life arrived in the village that day. 10 men experienced the physical and earthly blessings of God, but only one received the spiritual and eternal blessings. And his thankfulness shows just how genuine that faith was. We've so much to be thankful for. And thanking God reminds us that everything is a gift from him. If we speak out and witness to what God has done for others, we will not only grow closer to God, but we will support others on their faith journeys. And we will prove to those non-believers that they can trust in him too. We are saved entirely by the grace of God. Jesus came to earth, died on the cross and was resurrected, destroying death and bringing light and immortality, saving us and calling us to a holy life. So every day we need to take out a moment to remember, to count our blessings and to give thanks to God. Amen.